With a nicety. Let's begin. So today we're going to begin in the National Football League. Peter King of the MMQB.com had an interesting take on how the league should handle Deflategate moving forward. And he thinks NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell should return the first and fourth round picks back to the New England Patriots. And here's more of what he had to say. Goodell needs to realize he acted without nearly enough scientific evidence against the Patriots. The NFL has some significant circumstantial evidence in the case, the kind that should have prompted a strongly worded letter and $250,000 fine. Instead, Goodell killed an ant with a sledgehammer. Goodell admitted his error with Ray Rice in 2014 and will error again, and should, because it's the right thing to do. He should give the draft picks back to New England. So, guys, does Peter King have a point? Skip?
Stephen A. Smith, when I first read this early this morning, I must admit to you, I stood up alone. I stood up and gave Peter King a standing ovation because Peter King said exactly what I attempted to say the day that Brady was exonerated by Judge Berman. The difference here is I'm written off as just some crazy guy. And Peter King is as respected and plugged in as anyone who covers the National Football League. Ever. So Peter King writes, shaky evidence, shady science, and a total lack of interest in learning the truth are grounds for Roger Goodell to admit he erred in docking New England draft picks for Deflategate. Period. End of story. That was my premise on day one. Wait a second. If Brady is exonerated, then how can you hold the Patriots to losing their first-round draft pick this year, which is now 29th in the first round, and in 2017, next year, a fourth-round pick? If you want to let the $1 million fine ride for whatever, that's fine with me. But draft picks hurt. Draft picks are lifeblood of the franchise, and I don't see grounds to take draft picks now. Do I think that Roger Goodell will cease and desist and throw up his hands and say, you got me, I give him back? I don't think that. But he knows he should. And I'm glad that such a respected voice is pointing this out. And for the record, before you point it out, this ain't over, obviously. The NFL will not give this up. They will not let it go. Next week, they will be back in a courtroom trying to appeal this. Again, it's a home game for the NFL because they're appealing in Manhattan. And knowing the strings the NFL can pull, who knows what they might pull off here. They shouldn't have any grounds to win the appeal. I don't think they will. But when it comes to the NFL and Manhattan in a home game, you never know. So, just to reiterate, back on May 19th, remember when Robert Kraft gave his concession speech at the owners' meeting? He read a statement. He took no questions. And he said basically that he was going to do this in the interest of the league in big picture. All 32 teams, he was going to stop the rhetoric and accept his penalty, which was the first rounder and the fourth rounder. And then, you know what what Bob Kraft did when the NFL upheld Tom Brady's suspension of 4 games? Bob Kraft was outraged, and he backtracked, and he said that he should not have, he said, I was wrong to put my faith in the league. And he completely changed his point of view and his tone, and he said that he thought that by accepting the draft pick penalty, that the league would go easier on Brady and reduce his suspension. Obviously, that did not happen, and it wound up in a court of law. So Bob Kraft got taken to the cleaners by an NFL that then tried to destroy Tom Brady's reputation. They tried to incriminate him through the Wells report unfairly with no smoking gun. What was it? More probable than not? Are you kidding me? And with that, they tried to railroad and scapegoat Tom Brady for all the past sins the Patriots had committed, all the way back to, obviously, Spygate. They tried to lay it on Tom Brady and make him the scapegoat for all this. It was so unfair. I was outraged by it. And Tom Brady beat them at their own game. So here we are now. Do the right thing, Mr. Goodell. Do the right thing. Give back at least this year's first-round draft pick because they don't deserve to lose it.
Appreciate your take, as always. particularly on this matter, because obviously, Skip Bayless, although you are a Tom Brady lover to the extreme, the reality is that he is a bad man, and I ain't gonna lie to you. I didn't want to see an AFC Championship game without Tom Brady. I didn't want to see any games this NFL season without Tom Brady. I'll be the first to admit that. Having said all of that, Skip Bayless, I respectfully disagree with you. A matter of fact, I'll go as far as to say, in terms of the NFL giving back those draft picks, hell no, they should not. Absolutely, positively.
Well, then you don't
not.
respectfully disagree.
Well, I do.
You hell no me.
Well, you know, I could use other words, but it's not necessary because it wouldn't be apropos. Not just because these are FCC airways, but because of also the fact that I don't emphatically, I don't emphatically disagree with your point. You know, I just talk that way. You don't. Oklahoma City, New York City. Deal with it. Here's the deal.
Hey, if you could have seen my neighborhood, they talk that way in my neighborhood.
But I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you. You know,
I had my days.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. You don't have no potty mouth now. But here's the deal. Skip Bayless, I get where you're coming from because, again, all the evidence is circumstantial. I completely agree with you. But there are two lines. We are talking about the great Peter King here. The great Peter King, highly respected. I know, I mean, please. I mean, he is the man when it comes to the NFL. Nothing but respect and love for him. Listen,
top of the list.
He's been a guest on my radio show on several occasions. He's the gospel. He speaks. I listen. E.F. Hutton style. All of that's true. But I'd like to read one sentence to you that he wrote, and then a little small paragraph. One sentence, he says, the NFL has some significant circumstantial evidence in the case, the kind that should have prompted a strongly worded letter and a $250,000 fine. Instead, Roger Goodell killed an ant with a sledgehammer. I get that part, right? But then he goes to that circumstantial evidence. Grim, Skip.
We're going to retry the case here.
There's a lot of circumstantial evidence against the New England Patriots. Patriots locker room attendant Jim McNally disappearing with the footballs before the AFC Championship game for 100 seconds was wrong and shady. Point number two, McNally and team equipment assistant John Jastrzemski being held back from an additional interview with the Wells investigators was wrong. 3, the 6 phone calls once the NFL announced it would investigate whether the balls were deflated from Brady to Jastrzemski when they rarely ever spoke on the phone doesn't quite stink, but it's got an odor to it. And, of course, number 4, McNally calling himself the deflator in May of 2014 text is a bad look. What I'm saying to you, Skip, is this. Circumstantial evidence for all of you folks out there in the United States of America. You know, stop the whining, put on your big boy pants, and understand there's the court of public opinion, there's the court of law, and then there's the court of the National Football League. The National Football League, in terms of what they believe, is accentuated and embellished by a collective bargaining agreement that gave Roger Goodell this power. What you need to understand is that this is no longer about Tom Brady. It stopped being about Tom Brady a long time ago. What this is about is the power of the commissioner being challenged after you sign a collective bargaining agreement, because what you have is a situation where the Players Association, God bless them, I respect DeMaurice Smith, I respect a lot of guys in that office, but power that they lost or gave up or surrendered, whatever word that you want to use, while they were negotiating a collective bargaining agreement, is something they're retroactively trying to capture or recapture through this process, going to the courts or what have you. That's what this is about. If you're just talking about the evidence and we're looking at it from that perspective, my man Adam Shine, the ultimate lead-in on Sirius XM Mad Dog Radio, comes on before I do. You know, he made the case. He agrees with somebody like yourself, along with others. I am of the mindset that y'all are absolutely right if we're just looking at it and we're talking about the court of law. What we're talking about is the court of the National Football League. And what Roger Goodell and the NFL are saying, when we request an interview, who the hell are you to say no and don't show up? When we request your time, when we request records, when we request nuggets of evidence and we've asked you to provide us and you're giving us pushback, you need to understand that a presumption of guilt is going to get attached to you. And believe it or not, you better act accordingly. Skip Bayless, we work for ESPN. It's Walt Disney. It's Mickey Mouse. It's a happy place. You know, contrary to what people want to believe, it's a happy place. Here's the deal, Skip.
I want to believe it.
That's right. I'm just saying for outsiders that don't know any better. Breath smelling like Similac, wet behind the ears, they don't know any better. Here's the deal. We work for ESPN. Now, if you accuse me of something lawless, sure, I can get the court of law involved. If you accuse me of something along those lines, absolutely, court of public opinion. But there is a court called the Court of ESPN and Walt Disney. And we had damn well better capitulate and acquiesce to what they demand if we want to continue receiving the check that I'm getting, that I know my man is going to be getting. You understand what I'm saying? So guess what? This is a level of capitulation that we have to adjust to. Why? Because it's them. We don't own it. They do. So Tom Brady can appeal. And he could win that case initially. And now, Roger Goodell will step in along with the commissioner's office and the league office itself. And they will sit there and say, okay, you won that round, but here we come. But understand why they're doing it. They're not doing it anymore because the footballs were the because clearly we saw, first of all, we saw in the second half against Indianapolis in that AFC Championship game what Tom Brady could do with normal footballs. We saw throughout this season. I was getting ready to get to that, Skip. Yeah. We saw this year what he could do. It's not a matter of that. Their principled position is, we said we're coming. We're conducting this investigation. You had better be cooperative. And their challenge is that the New England Patriots and Tom Brady, along with Jastrzemski, McNally, or whomever, along the process, were not as cooperative as they should have been, which is where the proverbial sledgehammer came down. So when Peter King writes his column, and boy, is it an exceptional column with an exceptional position, and although I disagree with his ultimate conclusion, I respect where he's coming from. He is talking about evidence. I'm talking process. You're talking about evidence. I'm talking process, because guess what? I can sit up there and talk about my individual rights, my rights as an employee, and all of this other stuff. Let John Skipper and John Wildcat call me upstairs and say, we need to have a conversation. Guess what? I'm going to show up and I'm going to answer questions. Why? Because I fall under the umbrella of the brand. Tom Brady is trying to fight that. And my response to that is, good luck. Because, though, Roger Goodell doesn't have to get back to draft picks. You're lucky. Listen, they're going after Tom Brady because of the process. But this ain't no process involved when it comes to the draft pick. It comes down to the kindness of Roger Goodell's heart. And why should he be kind when you still have your star quarterback fighting him? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I give you a trade is what I'm trying to say. You want the draft picks back? All right, Tom Brady served at least 2 games.
Why?
Because
what did you prove?
Because what I'm saying is, if you're Roger Goodell, it's about the process and maintaining your power.
But you agree that he was wrongly convicted.
Well, you got to remember my position. I have always maintained, I don't believe that Tom Brady went and told him to deflate the footballs or whatever. What I have challenged is, it's hard for me to believe that you didn't know that the football was deflated when you're the quarterback. That's all I've ever said. I didn't accuse him of cheating. I didn't accuse him of making them deflate the football. All I said was, you can't tell me you knew nothing. You got to know something. I don't believe you knew nothing. That's all I've ever said.
Absolutely.
Well, that's where we disagree. That's where we disagree.
It would be much easier for me to believe that the head coach knew far more than the quarterback.
So the head coach knew, but Tom Brady, who touches the football, who gets a snap behind center, who hands it off to the running back, who throws it to Gronkowski or one of his bevy of wide receivers. Oh, Bill Belichick knew, but he did it. Come on now.
Wait a second.
The
science that Peter King wrote about, the ability to test the inflation or deflation of the football, was never reinforced this year. It was never proven to be an exact science. So you can't even prove to me that those footballs were deflated on that night in question.
Peter King also lamented the fact that testing wasn't done on a weekly basis. It was basically tested randomly. It was
this year.
No, right? Okay.
What he's talking about is he wanted the league to go through all 267 games this year to show that their science worked, that it worked that night of the AFC Championship game, that they could take into account the frigid weather versus hot weather versus the room temperature where they kept the balls at halftime. Does it change the inflation or deflation of the footballs? And nothing was ever proved. So Peter King concludes in his headline, he calls it shady science.
Sure.
So you're going to roll with that? You're okay with that?
Yeah.
You think that's fair?
Yes, because, again, it's not about the evidence. I agree with you. It's circumstantial and to some degree shady. The problem is that when you are giving the commissioner and his office that level of pushback, then you have brought a different problem to light.
He was innocent.
Because now you're wait a minute. Now you're challenging the the authority. They're saying, oh, listen, if you want to, let's be real about something here. If you want to cover up something, it's almost like that defendant, you get arrested, you got nothing to say until your lawyer shows up, and then